In this series of videos, we'll learn how to use MATLAB to plot data. Let's go ahead and open up a new script, and I will call this one Plotting in MATLAB. The first thing we need in order to draw a plot or a graph is some data. So let's get ourselves an X and a Y. Let's call our X, let's have 0 to 2 to 18. Remember, when there are three numbers, the number in the middle is the increment. So we're counting from 0 to 18 in steps of 2. And we'll have our Y be, let's pick, we're going to need a lot of numbers here. So I'm just going to pick some at random. You can pick similar ones or other numbers. 4 and then 6.29. Let's do 6.85, 11.19, 13.19, and I'm going to use that trick of the ... to hold over to the next line. If I remember how to do that. There we go, ... that way I can continue on the next line and it will treat it as if it was one long line. If yours all fits on one line, that's fine. But you can't split this over to 2 lines without that ellipses. Let's see if I have enough here. 18 something and 14 something. So let's run it and see if they're both, this is the easiest way to see if they're the right size, is to look over here. Just try it and say, oh look, they're both 1×10s. Perfect. They're the same size. That's what I needed. I won't need to look at those anymore. Let's try, let's make a quick note. Note, matching dimensions, 1×10. Now we use the plot command. Plot x, y. This is plotting at its most basic. It will never be enough for a challenge problem or a homework problem to just write plot x, y. But let's run it and see what happens. So on my screen, I've got a pop-up. This figure has popped up with a little jaggedy line like a mountain showing all my data. It's just called figure 1, and I want to show you what you can do with this. The first thing is this little arrow right here. If you mouse over, it says dock figure 1. I'm going to go ahead and click that and dock it. We can change the way that it shows up. We can move it over here. We can do whatever we want with it. But let's get back to that editing window so we can do some more things, because plot XY is never enough. You've got to tell me what you're looking at. So I'm going to write this, probably I'll say it several times, but every graph deserves a title and axis labels with an exclamation point. Every graph needs, that way it'll fit on one line. 2 exclamation points, that's how important this is. Every graph you ever make should have a title and axis labels, period, end of story. Here's how you do it. X label, and then in parentheses, you put a single quotation mark. So single quote, and let's say the X is time in seconds. And then I close the single quotation mark, and it changes color from red, which is an error color, to a nice, beautiful magenta. Okay, so X label, Y label. Notice these labels come after the command to plot. So MATLAB is going to create the plot first, and then it will have a place to, oops, let's actually give it a title. Then it will have a place to put the titles. So distance in feet. And let's call the title, again, single quote mark, lab experiment number 1. You can use symbols here. You can use LaTeX symbols like /pi, /omega, things like that. And let's do one more command here, grid on. So grid on is going to change how this appears. Let's run this section and see what happens. So I've still got mine docked. If you had left yours open, it's going to just replace it in the same window. If you had closed your window, it should pop up again. But if you lost your window, it's probably hidden behind your MATLAB window. This happens all the time where you think you should have a figure pop up and it's not there. Check your Windows taskbar, check your Safari Mac taskbar, because it's probably lost behind your MATLAB window somewhere. Very common. All right, I'm going to undock this, by the way. Let's go here. Undock figure 1. That way I get a nice view. I've got time in seconds, distance in feet, and then my title here. I'm going to close this. When I run it again, it'll pop up again. By the way, if you wanted to use a single quote mark in your title, like Jessica's data, take a look at what happens. The single quote mark closes the title, and then we have a bunch of things in black because it doesn't know what to do with them. So the way to use a quote mark is to use two single quotes. Two single quotes to escape. That way if you actually wanted to use a single apostrophe, you can. So let's run this one more time and see that I do get a nice little apostrophe there. All right, I closed it again. What if, this does bring up a good question though, what if we want to look at two figures in the same problem, in the same program? Because if I do plot, it's going to rewrite on top of that same figure. That's what happened every time we ran that section. New figure, rewrites it on top, it totally overwrites the other window. So there's a couple of ways to do this. We'll start with two options. You can use the pause command or the figure command. Let me put these in quote marks so that you know they are commands. Pause or figure. I'll show you how to do it. One way here is figure 2. Figure 2 tells MATLAB to use a new window. If you want to do figure 3, figure 4, you could have all kinds of windows. So let's create a new Y, and then we'll get both of these on the screen at the same time. And it just occurred to me I still want this all to run together, so I'm going to take off that header cell so that I can use the run section command and still get it to do the whole thing. New Y equals Y. Let's take all the Y values and square them. So element by element, take the original Y values and square them. And now we'll plot X, comma, new Y. And I almost forgot to include axis labels and a title for my graph after I made such a big deal out of it. So let's do this. X label is still time in seconds, and the Y label is distance squared, and the unit is feet squared. All right, one more thing, we need a title, so let's say lab experiment number 2. The color helps me remember that I need to close the parentheses, close the quotation mark and the parentheses. Let's change this one back to lab experiment number 1. I don't need that comment anymore. Well, it's fine. And now when I plot this, I should get two different plots. So remember, if you don't see your windows, they may have disappeared behind MATLAB. Let's run section and see what we get. So here's figure 1. That's got lab experiment number 2 in it, which is not what I thought would happen, but it's because I don't have the figure command here. Somehow it got commented out. So let's uncomment that. Let's go back to the lab experiment number 2, which is in figure 1, which is not what I wanted. Close that. Now when I run the section, I should be able to look at both of them. So I've got figure 1 with lab experiment 1, figure 2 with lab experiment 2. You see also the effect of that grid on command. The grid has been turned on, and it's only on figure 1 because that was the active window in MATLAB at the moment that the grid command got executed. At the moment that it got executed. All right, let's quickly do the pause while we're here, just so that you see that there are two different ways of doing this, and then we'll go on to something else. So the pause way is, instead of doing this, I could just use the command pause. So I'm going to comment this out and say pause, and then it'll, let's show you what happens. So now when I run section, here's figure 1, lab experiment 1, and I'm going to hit the space bar, and it then shows me the second plot still in the same window. So I didn't get two different windows, but I did get that extra second to look at it and see it before going on to the next plot. So depending on whether you want two figure windows or one figure window with two different plots shown in it, you might want to use either the figure command or the plot command. That's all for now. I'll see you next time.